Hey everybody, it's Kevin from RPH Ally, and I have a wonderful guest with me. Swathi and I spent a little bit of time together. It feels like now 100 years ago, but with my family having COVID, having the flu, Swathi and I being really busy with business-related things, it's so nice to get some time to be able to talk to her. Before we jumped on air, I will tell you that we were going over my Backstreet Boys attendance and some of her favorite fangirl things when she was growing up, but just lots of fun. But today, we get to really dive into some things that I know you guys care about most is within this pharmacy world, and we see so many different changing environments. We see so many opportunities that are coming one way or the other. Like, how do you make that pivot? How do you make that switch? How do you find other individuals that have made some of those changes and seen what's out there and taken full advantage of it, and really create a path for themselves so that instead of you having to do all the hard road work kind of elements, you can look at somebody like this fantastic individual next to me here and see what's kind of happening. So Swathi, so glad to have you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I literally just checked. I was like, is it Tuesday? Yes. I was gonna say it's a great Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. It's yeah, no, it's a great day either way though. Yeah. And I mean it's been back to back, but it's one of those days where you're like, wow, I'm so excited to be doing what I'm doing. So this is like the perfect kind of like mindset for me to come into the talk and like share my experience and how other people can find what really lights them up.
Yeah, and I think just like you saying lights them up, that during our conversation, and we were talking about kind of what you're looking to do post graduation, you had a moment that you had that, like you had a like, there it is, like I want to do this. I found in your case, I found this individual that really inspires me, and I want to be able to carve a path somewhat similar. So can you tell us a little more about that, like your transition from I'm be a pharmacist and here's my opportunities to, oh wow, this looks amazing.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up, I was always like around herbs like Ayurveda, but then also my parents were in the healthcare professional sphere. I mean, my dad was a supplement formulator and my mom was a nurse. So I already had this idea that I wanted to do something in healthcare, be a healthcare professional. And then when I got to know some pharmacists that I knew growing up, to me, I saw them as owners of pharmacies or they worked in marketing and they like every pharmacist I'd met was doing something interesting and different. And so it was a very appealing career to me who like I pretty much knew I wanted to be in healthcare. I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to make a difference, but I wasn't sure exactly what that was going to look like. So I always saw pharmacy as like this very versatile option. And so that's initially why I pursued it. And then as I was in pharmacy school, I really learned about all the more conventional sides of pharmacy that I guess as a child I wasn't really that, I didn't really see that much, which, was of course being in a hospital and a clinic and a pharmacy, those type of settings. And so as I learned about those, and of course, like in school, that's so much of the focus of the curriculum is on these particular avenues that are very much set paths. I wasn't really finding something that resonated with me. That being said, I mean, I had amazing rotations and I loved my experiences, but I couldn't see myself doing them, like 40, 50 hours a week, but I enjoyed it for the circumstance like in which I was able to do it. So I was constantly trying to find where, my place in pharmacy would be and how I could hone in all of these amazing skills, but do something that really resonated with me as, a person, whether it's like a holistic, human being or also as a healthcare professional. So in my search to really craft my perfect appy schedule, I went out on creeping on LinkedIn and Instagram and trying to find people. I mean, I guess at that point, Instagram was not really a thing, but either way, I was creeping on all the possible platforms at the time and trying to find like someone who was doing something that seemed exciting to me. And so one of the things was I found an integrative health pharmacist. I had found out that she had an appy student from my school a few years before that. I, of course, reached out to that student and was like, or I guess she wasn't a student anymore, but I reached out to her and was like, how was your experience? Would love to hear about it. And she like said that it was incredible and she had learned so much. And so I reached out to that mentor, Dr. Pam Tarlow, and was like, would you be willing to have a student, come from, across the country? So I put all my appy rotations together and ended up being able to do one with her.
Wow.
And that is one of my biggest pieces of advice for anyone who's still in school is like, if you have the opportunity to seek out these types of appy rotations or apprenticeships, or even on your off block. Let's say you already got your appy schedule and you're like, oh, but I wanted to try specialty pharmacy, or I wanted to try something else that you
Yep.
didn't get an appy rotation in. Given like the virtual schema of everything right now, I mean, the opportunities are literally endless. Like you could find an MSL online and be like, hey, can I sit in with my video off in a few of your calls to do shadowing? Like there's so many things now that you can do that, you know, like COVID, one of the silver linings of it is that now there's all these different opportunities to learn. And now this appy rotation that I ended up doing in person, my mentor does it for the most part virtually, because she can provide so much of that education to more people around the country, or more students rather around the country. So I had a chance to go out and do a rotation with her, and literally within a few days was like, this is what I've been searching for and this is what I want to do. So I asked her, and I always say, like, you got to shoot your shot, so to speak. So I asked her, like, is there exactly so I asked her, you know, is there some way that I could, you know, after graduation move back here and, you know, pursue this full time? And she was like, you know, I've always thought about having a resident or someone who could train with me more full time, but, you know, it would really have to be a lot of effort on both of our parts to figure out exactly what this is going to look like and what type of relationship we're going to have and everything. So, you know, one conversation led to another, and I decided to do exactly that. And just kind of with a suitcase and a dream, if you will, I just like graduated and I got on a plane and I moved out to train with her. And we decided to start the first ever and still only residency program for pharmacists interested in pursuing this unconventional path in integrative health. So I was able to co-found that with her, but also be the first resident. So a lot of that was figuring out what the curriculum was going to be, where we were going to train, how we were going to get those hours, all the things. And we ended up, you know, I trained partially at the Independent Natural Pharmacy where I initially did my appy rotation, which was an incredible place to learn because it was all an interdisciplinary healthcare professional place. So if I wanted to learn about homeopathy or traditional Chinese medicine, I was literally learning from the expert that also worked there, or the clinical nutritionist was, you know, teaching me about the importance of flax and different things like that. So it was an amazing place to learn. So I did that. And then I also, a few days a week, would go to an interdisciplinary setting as well. That was a clinic. It was an HIV clinic that was a free clinic that was run through a school of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. So I got to work very much one-on-one with a lot of these healthcare professionals and really realize that pharmacists can play such an amazing role. I mean, some of the questions they would ask is like, you know, a patient just came in and they're wondering, like, can I take, like, can they take ginseng with their aspirin they take every day, or with, and like just these questions that, like, you know, as someone in with my expertise and the expertise that's like growing with, or rather not the expertise that's growing, but the interest that I see growing from so many other new healthcare professionals or even existing current ones, are they're seeing that patients are asking these types of questions. And so whether or not you want to go be an integrative health pharmacist like me, you still need to be able to answer these questions in a productive way, because that's one of the things that I've learned throughout this path, is that it doesn't matter if you want to specialize in this. As a pharmacist, as the most accessible healthcare professional, you need to figure out how you're going to answer these questions. So if a patient is asking you about CBD or about ginseng or about Don Quai or red clover, like, at least you should have some type of familiarity with it so that you can give that kind of advice and know those like certain tips and tricks that are important to know. Like, I mean, one of the things I think is most important is that, you know, not just because it's natural doesn't mean it's safe for everyone. And so whether it's CBD, whether it is any of those herbs that I just mentioned, I mean, some of them interact with and are metabolized by the CYP450 system, which is like, as pharmacists, we know so much about that system being involved in metabolizing like 60, 70+% of the prescription medications on the planet. And then if you add to that the number of supplements that are metabolized by it, or the number of herbs, I mean, the number just like astronomically goes up. And so there's so many potential issues. I'm not saying that like they aren't safe for most people, but it's possible if you're on a high intensity statin, or if you're on amlodipine or warfarin, that there are some of these herbs that are like big concern to me. So I hope that answered your question. I kind of just kept going after that.
Beautiful job. I think you gave a lot of intrigue and kind of like overall picture to like why you chose to do what you did. Like, you didn't only answer like, hey, Kevin, I had this moment and I went down this path. You said, this is why that path is so important. And these are things I'm passionate about, why I chose it in general, which I love. Why this? I mean, going back to kind of that decision that you made, why did you think you needed somebody else? Like, why did you feel like you needed, because this is a question that I get quite often, Swathi, is like, we're pharmacists, we've got all this knowledge, we graduate and we go through this didactic training that we have all these experts telling us how to do these things. And then you and I get out into the real world and we realize that some of the opportunities, some of the pathways, they have not been created by the bulk of pharmacy. So we've really got to find our spots, shoot our shots, as you said, to be able to get into those places and really find ways to expand our knowledge and our reach. But for you, like, what was that particular preceptor mentor that you were able to latch onto? What made it in your mind like, this is essential, that my next step is working with them before going and trying to do this on my own or going any other path or route to get to where I think I want to go? Why did you choose that way to do it?
Yeah, so for me, it was realizing that, the way that I viewed integrative health was that, prescriptions are not evil. I think that they have their place in therapy and that for a lot of people, it's the right choice. However, a lot of the time, people that are on these prescription medications, I mean, simply from a statistical standpoint, the average American, average North American is on like a certain number of medications. I think it's like the number changes, but it's like between 1 and 6 medications. And so if the average person is on those medications and they actually are working for them, which there are certain people that swear by their statin or they swear by their, lisinopril every single day, that, I'm not looking to swap out that medication if they're super okay with taking it every day. Instead, how can we optimize their, quality of life? And maybe that's the, addition of supplements and herbs and the conversation around nutrition and lifestyle and sleep hygiene and all these different things that are so important, and they're not just limited to like one modality. And I think that was for me what I didn't resonate with like the conventional medicine structure, was that it was like only one option and you could only like talk about prescriptions, whereas like the way I view integrative health is really this intersection of all of them together. And at the end of the day, it's what we call patient-centered shared decision making. So it's being a guide for the patient, illustrating all these potential options, and then the patient deciding what was going to work best for them and achieve their treatment goals. And so through that, like once I really realized that that's the way that I view health and that's what I want to pursue. I mean, unfortunately, fortunately, depending on how you see it, I mean, the integrative world is very polarizing, and it's very polarized in general. And a lot of the healthcare professionals within this entire sphere are like anti-prescription, or they're like anti-herb, it's like one or the other, right? Or like even with like comparing conventional with the integrative space, they're viewed as opposites, and I don't see them as opposites. So even when trying to find another mentor within integrative health, like I found that there were these very, very one or the other type of ideas. Whereas Dr. Charlo, when working with her, she was like, let's look at each patient. And for most people, it's an and question, not an or question. And like, that's what I loved. And so for me, it was like, this is the person I want to train with, because this way of viewing health, wellness, and healing really resonates with me. So that would be my piece of advice, is like when you're out seeking a mentor, that you find someone that you really like understand their methodology and thinking and it works for you. If you are trying to emulate their career path. If you're not trying to emulate their career path and you're just looking for these particular skills, like maybe they're a phenomenal communicator, or they're a really good mentor, or they're really well connected and connect you to other people. I mean, it really just depends on what you're looking for out of a mentor at the end of the day. I was looking for someone, especially so early on in my career, to like emulate what she was doing, because I was just so in awe of everything she was able to do and the impact and the level of like job satisfaction that she had, that I feel like a lot of pharmacists don't have right now. And that was like a theme as I was like in school and finishing school, that like there were just so many pharmacists, and even more and more nowadays I hear about burnout every other word from pharmacists. And so like, even I guess I was at it a little bit on the early side, but I knew that going into it, it was something that I I wanted to ensure whatever I was putting my time, effort, and energy into really made sense for me. And I just had to like take that leap of faith for, when I found the right person.
Yeah, you finding a pioneer in the space that you really felt like you could emulate, I love, especially that it was an individual that was not only talking the talk from an academic standpoint, but literally doing it with patients on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like that is always my biggest element when it comes to finding a mentor. Is in academia, like we've got a lot of really bright minds, but their experience is often those three buckets that you mentioned right off the bat. Like those are the worlds that they're living in most often. So their knowledge, their skill sets are going to be very honed into those spaces. So being able to find some of the new and innovative things that are happening inside of pharmacy that are not inside of those buckets, they didn't exist inside of those, and the ways that they were crafted were oftentimes, Swathi, you and I know this, off grant funding. And you can't use grant funding to be able to make a business model. Like a viable business model has to be able to return revenue, and you have to have something that people want, demand, et cetera. And so you finding somebody that had all of that in their back pocket, I love. You're really teasing me into pulling me into a conversation. So I'm just going to go there because I love functional medicine. I love using herbs. We have an herbalism expert on our team in Dr. Marina Buskov. And,
Oh, she's amazing.
and I think with her, her and I's conversations have been exactly what you were just talking about there is we don't have to live in two different worlds. Like we don't have to think that one is bad or the other is bad. And that's how we have to move forward with. And honestly, like when I was listening to a walkthrough with Dr. Gary Ferguson the other day. He's a Native American healer based out of Alaska. He was taking a group of kids and they went and walked out in a field and plucked geranium and fireweed and yarrow, to make a salve.
Yep.
And the really interesting thing behind it, Swathi, is like when he's doing that, he wasn't saying that anti-inflammatories are bad or that you should never look at Pensid. And if you ever, take ibuprofen, that you're killing yourself. Like none of those things were talked about. It was really saying like, here's how we can reconnect from a cultural understanding. Here's how we can recognize the value of some of the things that we already have in nature and have available, and how we can utilize those in clinical care. And so with all that knowledge that you accumulated over that period of time, very similar to what Marina and Gary are really looking to push in their communities, you did an interesting thing with it. You didn't just stay in kind of that one lane siloed path of, I'm going to be a practitioner working with individual patients on a one-on-one basis. You did something that I think is really fun. And a lot of pharmacists, I love that they get to hear this story from you of, you could have stayed. Like you could have just carved your own pathway. You could have done this and you could have done clinical care, which I think we need more of. Like we need more pharmacists to get into herbalism and be able to recognize how valuable that is for their communities. But you did an entirely different pathway. And I'm so curious to hear what the audience thinks, afterwards, but tell us more. Like how did it go from, I'm a bright-eyed individual getting into functional medicine and carving my own path to, oh, wow, this is interesting and a whole new world I'm going to jump into?
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up, I always wanted to be, if you ask like any of my teachers or anything growing up, like if they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, my answer to, my parents was healthcare professional and, their world. And then my answer in like the school world was always like an inventor. So, I mean, I always had this mindset of wanting to like create things and innovate things and I think back at some of like the crazy projects that I did when I was like in elementary school, and I'm like, I mean, that was innovative, but it was weird. But anyways, it was always something that like came really naturally to me to like think outside of the box and do something a little bit out there. And I mean, even in pharmacy school, all my friends were like, oh, it's just Swathi doing her own thing. Because I would always like choose things that seemed interesting to me, but didn't necessarily seem interesting to the average pharmacy student. So, by the time I graduated, I was the only person in my whole class who had never really worked in a pharmacy because I was trying so many different things, like just to see, what would stick. So, I mean, I had a chance to intern at or be like a research intern at a medical device startup. So I loved that. I also was very interested in research. So on the side, I was doing bench research, and then also ended up doing some like clinical research as a research associate. So I worked on a phase 3 clinical trial. So it was a lot of different things I did outside of school, and a lot of these things that I did from scratch that I was so proud of. So one of the things being starting my College of Pharmacy's first ever volunteer program. And so that was at a free clinic. So it was a bilingual diabetes education program. And like when I was asked on a podcast interview, I was asked somewhere, what are some of the things you're most proud of, or if you could pinpoint like one or two things. And like the things that I reflect really are those things that I've started from scratch, or I've really helped people cultivate on their own. And so, whether it is the volunteer program or, starting this residency program and everything, like for me, the next natural step, even though it seems like unconventional for me, I think the most natural step was to like either create a company or create an entity, like to do something like that. So as I mentioned before, with the creeping online with like LinkedIn and everything, it's all about networking and trying to find the right people. I mean, that's how we met, was through a connection. So it's you never know who you're going to meet and who you're going to, resonate with. And at the end of the day, it's just approaching the conversation with like, hey, what's up? Let's see, like, what you're up to, not like coming in with any type of agenda, I think is really important. And so that's initially how I chatted with like my two co-founders for our company, Element Apothec, as we met via LinkedIn DM. And of course, this was pre-COVID, so I had a chance to meet them in person. And I met the CEO for coffee, and we had a lovely conversation. And she just seemed so like genuinely interested in just like changing the way people think about health from a more integrative standpoint and using botanicals to do that. So of course that very much resonated with me. So initially I said yes to being a medical advisor at the company, and then kind of continued to get more involved. And she asked me officially to be a co-founder, and then we launched products in 2020. And ever since then, I was doing it on the side as a passion project for so long. And as of last year, the middle of last year, I have decided to pursue this passion project full time. So it's been really exciting to see the growth and the trajectory and all of that. And to be a brand that uses CBD, that uses other active cannabinoids, but at the same time really looks to what other botanicals are out there and how we can use these botanicals to synergize with cannabinoids, and how they can really work in this beautiful like concert and marriage, and not just focus on CBD, not just focus on this one particular herb, which granted is awesome, but there's so many other herbs that Mother Nature has provided that like I think that there should be a way to like decrease the amount of active, ingredients, but then still optimize the benefit. And at the end of the day, like every day people ask me like, do I use my pharmacy knowledge still as like, a chief scientific officer of a company? And honestly, yes, I use it every single day, whether it's, a lot of what I do at the company is, R&D, product formulation, clinical development, clinical science work. But then the other side is like very much the medical affairs, medical education side. And I really kind of like bridge my time between the two. And like using my pharmacy knowledge is so key every single day, because a lot of the conversations when we're thinking about formulation is optimizing benefit versus risk. And I feel like that's one of the key takeaways I had from pharmacy school was like, for every single patient, how are we ensuring that they get the most benefit for the least amount of risk, and ensuring that that ratio is, at the right ratio for each single person. And understanding that at the end of the day, I guess my spin on that is understanding at the end of the day that each person is very, specific and individual, and we need to view each person as their own particular, personalized medicine unit. And I think that that's really important, and something that, I wish that we talked more about in pharmacy school, especially with the advent of like pharmacogenomics and herbs and all the intersection of these different modalities. Because telling someone to go to bed at 9 p.m. for some people, they have like, 4 kids, they have so many things going on, like going to bed at that hour is not going to make sense. Whereas someone else, they might be an overnight pharmacist, they can't go to bed at 9 p.m. So it's like, it really makes a world of a difference to think about each person separately. And also with the company too, it was really important to me, that also was very important to my co-founders, was to find a medical advisory team that really made sense, that had expertise in their, designated specialty. So that's been one of the things that I've been really proud of, is building out this medical advisory team that has an integrative gastroenterologist, an integrative dermatologist, an integrative OBGYN, an integrative pharmacist that specializes in pain management and neurology. And then now we've just recently added as well a physician who has full specialty of clinical trials, as we start to kick that off as one of the first CBD brands to really have a voice in that space, which is also very important to me. So I mean, it really depends on what your values are as a healthcare professional, as a pharmacist, whoever is listening, and then trying to find those roles in that path. It doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be, integrative medicine. It can be whatever you want it to be,
Yep.
but just ensuring that like it's drawing on, really what makes you happy. The other thing I would say too is that it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Like I worked on like Element Apothec and everything on the side for like 2 years or so before I was really able to make that decision to work on it full time and give it my all and really give it a chance. Like it's not something that's going to be, like overnight success or something that will just like go viral and that'll be it. Like there's so much more to creating a company with like the right humans and the right mindset, or taking on the role that's really going to help you succeed. And I think also, and maybe as pharmacists, it's just a thing that's like ingrained in our mind that like, okay, what's next? And like, what's the next thing I'm going to achieve? And like having such a set path, I think has its pros and its cons. I love the idea of planning a year in advance. Maybe, I mean, I love planning in general, but like, I try not to like over super plan, because I think that like leaves a lot of opportunities like left in the dust if you're so like narrow-mindedly like I only want to do this one thing, that it doesn't allow for the flexibility and possibility. And I think that always having it in my mind that I wanted to do something in entrepreneurship, I had no idea what that was going to look like until I just left opportunities open, continued to network, continued to meet people, and just like honestly see where it led and see what felt right.
I love it, Swathi. I mean, I think that you kind of going over that career journey and seeing all the different opportunities that were there and try to take advantage of them as much as possible, just based on your passions and the things that you really wanted to be able to cultivate, within the profession, is just, it's so imperative to everybody's career journeys to find those things. Oftentimes, you really talked about, sometimes it starts off slow, but being able to analyze what is the return on investment, like what is our ROI for taking a given venture, is an interesting thing. And I think that's one thing that I try to do as often as I can with any of the thought leaders on our team, is like, what are we going to do next? That's going to be able to help someone to be able to recognize this is important. This is something that you can do to be able to benefit your career and you can enjoy for the future of pharmacy. So that's my last question to you, Swathi, is really, you talked about a few things that I love the intersection of. You talked about how can we make things personalized? How can we incorporate pharmacogenomics? How can we do, a few of those elements that I've seen a few different supplement companies start to jump on that a little bit early, in my personal opinion, but be able to say like, here, we're going to do an analysis, a blood analysis, a bioassay, whatever the case may be. And then we're going to craft your supplements based on your individual, proclivities or laboratory measurements that are coming back to us. The science right now, at the point we are, maybe not as strong to be able to do that on an individualized micro basis. But I am curious, in the somewhat maybe near future, like, is that something that you feel like is part of the pharmacy future? And the exact same thing, like when it comes to the future of pharmacy and how you're kind of delving into things here in the world you're living in currently, do you think that is a pathway that more pharmacists need to get into?
I think that every pharmacist should view health, healing, and wellness with a personalized lens. And I think that that could mean a lot of different things for different people. I think for some people that means going down the route and specializing in genomics. And then for other people, that means like creating really specialized, personalized like nutrition plans for people who have pre-diabetes and who are looking for, an opportunity to not be put on metformin high dose or something, So I think at the end of the day, again, it comes down to what the pharmacist wants to pursue. But I do think personalized medicine is going to be at the forefront. I very much could see that pharmacy and overall just this idea of personalized medicine taking its way into, you know, having genomic testing being the average for every single person. I mean, I love that idea. I do agree that there is a lot of research that still needs to be done in that space. I actually just spoke to the American Psychiatric Association and their pharmacists, or not pharmacists, oh my gosh, their psychiatrists and their researchers about the intrinsic link between genomics and pharmacogenomics really and cannabinoids, because I mean there is a lot of possibility with that. I mean, what we know so far comes down to like the very specific SIPs that primarily metabolize cannabinoids, but there's so much more to discover, because of course that's only phase 1 metabolism. There's so much more than that too. So I mean there's a lot more to learn, and I think that pharmacists are very well oiled to figure out and learn as so much of this progresses. And I always say that pharmacists have incredible amounts of transferable skills. And it's like, it's something that we are not really told in school necessarily, that like these skills are transferable. It's like we know how to critically think, evaluate primary literature, look at trends, look at, you know, what's going on in the pharmacy world, and then figure out what we can do as problem solvers to make it better. And so I think part of that problem solving will come down to personalized medicine. And, you know, what that looks like exactly, I'm not sure, but I do think that the future of pharmacy and the future of health in general really will be this intersection of health and of wellness, looking at prescriptions also in relationship with botanicals and supplements and nutrition, and how all of it can play such a beautiful role together rather than looking at it in, you know, simple silos.
I love that. I heard something the other day that someone was talking about, how they phrase it, Swathi, is our pharmacists, modern pharmacists, overeducated was the question. And it like broke me inside. It was like, oh man, like this is the worst thing that someone could put out there, is that we are trying to distill everything down to transactional pharmacy. And like you're pointing out, like the future of medicine, not just the future of pharmacy, but the future of medicine and health is these integrative pathways that we barely know enough on right now. So it's really the expansion of knowledge. You know, like we put the drop in the bucket with the PharmD. And yes, there can be some shifts and changes inside of academia to be able to gear us toward, you know, what is truly going to be fruitful for a long-term career. But I can't agree with you more. I think that there are so many elements that is just, how do we expand in the right direction so that we have these opportunities to see them happen? And the scalability is another question, you know, for maybe to get in on another day of, before we had literally someone graduated, here's a bucket that they go into, and this can be a career path for the next 40 years. Moving forward, maybe the degree is something a little bit different. You know, maybe Swathi's path is something for folks to be able to look at. Maybe some of the things that RPH Ally is doing in general is something to be able to peek at and see, does it make sense for me to get a beat on things that I wasn't exposed to previously, that other people are doing successfully and have made into a career? What has it taken them to get there? What's the ROI? I think all of those things are so beautifully said. And the future of medicine, I think, is in a really good place when smart pharmacists like Swathi are burning bridges and saying, no, I don't think that any of this is necessary for us anymore, because we need to be looking down the road for what we can cross next. And I think that's just genius. And I really appreciate you being on with me and taking the time, Swathi. Any parting words?
No, that, you know, like also just like everything that I said too. I mean, it's like, that's my viewpoint of pharmacy, but would love to hear everyone else's perspective too, and what everyone thinks and how they think that the career and the whole world of pharmacy will evolve. I mean, I personally think that, like, even more than what I just said, I was thinking as you were speaking that, like, I mean, pharmacists can do so much that we shouldn't even feel limited to just this idea of personalized medicine. Like, we can go run companies, we can go like run foundations, we can go like take over the world in any capacity that we so choose. Like, we don't have to be limited to just healthcare. Just another, like, I guess, in addition to what I said before, it's not just about the healthcare sphere and like the future of healthcare and the future of pharmacy. It's really about like the future of what we as professionals, whether we're healthcare professionals or not, like what we want to do and what we want to contribute. So that's all I wanted to add.
I love that broadened system thinking. I mean, we've got so many, you know, we've got project managers, we have people that are leading foundations, we have people that have exited healthcare altogether and are looking at the real estate industry in new ways. I mean, it is very fascinating how limited sometimes we may view our overall skill set. and then see how it's been broadened by so many trailblazers to say there's so much you can do with what you know, and just being able to recognize it. So perfect, Swathi. If you guys want to get involved, jump on rphally.com. I'm going to try to pull Swathi in there as often as I possibly can, and we hope you enjoyed it. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.